Okay, so for everybody who's sitting in on this, let's just kind of lay the groundwork. For those of you who don't know Kelley McKay, we're going to introduce him in just a second, as well as myself, Pete Ramsey, because I think Kelly's going to put this over on his, and I'm going to put it on mine. And we're interviewing for a third person, and we think we've got a really good candidate. But here's what we're trying to do, okay? How do we take and get past all of the advertising, flashy, over the top garbage that's out there, cut through the clutter and make it real. Okay, real talk about this industry, real talk about running a business in this industry, real talk about what it's like to be under the house, in the attic, on the roof, get the cuts, all of the scars, everything that comes with that. Instead of these glory blowing wind up your skirt scenarios that if you take this course, you're going to be so successful, etc. So you can be like me, so. And we're not attacking anybody, but the point is, things are never what they appear. And so if that's a little bit of what we're talking about, so let's talk HVAC talk and let's make it real. So let's start off with Kelley McKay talking a little bit of what is it? Tell us about you, Kelley, and what is it that you bring to the table for these conversations?
Sure.
And I know what it is, but for the sake of those who don't.
I feel like some of the stuff that you just said, quite possibly, I could fall into that bucket because I do have courses that I sell and I bought memberships and stuff. But it comes from a place of genuine, heartfelt. I just want to help people because, and I joined the business. I got married in 1996. Most people know my story. I'm not going to go through my whole story, but I struggled in my business for many, many years. And it was certain key areas of the business that I learned. And once I started learning those, things started to change for the better. And I finally wasn't in so much pain anymore. Not that I never experienced pain. I just last year I experienced pain, and that's part of the business, right? There's nobody. I've heard a couple people say,
yeah,
that being in the HVAC industry is like it's like dog years. Like I've heard a couple of people say that. The gal that's a partner with me in our what we do in our coaching stuff, she was saying that to me just today, actually. So there's a lot of truth to that. Like it can be difficult. It doesn't have to be, but the inner battle that happens in your mind and the fear that we have surrounding each stage of the business growth,
right,
and the lack of business acumen and the lack of management abilities and the lack of just structure, because we all know that the majority of HVAC businesses get started by being a technician. The majority of them. I know there's some sales guys out there, and I was a technician.
Right. Okay.
Just yeah, 26 years in the business.
Wow.
Started in 1996. I am started in 1996 when I got married, and so started my business 2008 and wound up actually selling it early this year. Just kind of fell into my lap. I had talked to a lawyer a couple years previously about succession planning, and I had gotten kind of started on the process, but I hadn't taken it any step further. But I just had an opportunity arise, and I took it. So
yeah.
So I like to help people get out of pain, because it's lonely. That you've heard the old phrase, it's lonely at the top. Well, whether you're at the top of your one-man company or you've got a company with 20 people in it, it still can feel lonely if you don't meet with some like-minded business owners that are going through the same things you're going through. And so I wanted to create something for those people.
So there's a saying out there, those who can't do, teach. What have you done in a nutshell? Have you done this? Or are you just talking?
No, I've absolutely done this. For 14 years, a relatively successful business in a really, really tough market.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so um, there isn't a single thing, put it this way, I've got multiple people reach out to me through either sometimes Facebook. Was talking to a guy this morning through Messenger,
Sure.
sometimes email, and sometimes through YouTube. And any single problem that's been presented to me by any of those people, there's not a single one that I haven't dealt with 10 times over. I'm not saying that to be like I'm on some pedestal. I'm not on a pedestal. I've just been there and done that. There's really nothing in the business that I haven't had happen. Like you could name anything, and I could tell you an instance where it happened.
Yeah, and
So
I think that's an
like,
admirable quality. And actually, we were talking about that before we hit record. Is how do you maintain that humility, but yet let everybody know I know what the heck I'm talking about. I've been here, done this, right? Without hitting that level of I'm the expert. Look at me. You too can be like me, and you can have all of these vans and all this stuff. You hit the nail on the head. Well, I shouldn't say you hit a chord with me when you started your business in a tough market, probably because, like me, you didn't understand what demographic research was about and competitive analysis and all this
yeah,
other stuff before you started, right? So, but you did it regardless. And a lot of those guys that are, braggarts and I do this and I do that, and in other industries, not just ours, and
oh
guys, for the
yeah,
most part, a lot of the
across the
guys out
world.
there, teachers are really good. So we're not targeting anybody. This is just a generality.
Yeah,
I love that humility and down to earth. And you were a tech, and you've got the cuts and the scars and the bruises, and even big shot Ken Goodrich. He called me one day, and he said that he said, Pete, you're like me, and that you've got the scars on your back, and that is what I see in you, right, as well. And so that's the thing. Those who've been there and and dealt with all these problems.
oh yeah,
I noticed that your focus has shifted over into the business management and all of the different things that are creating these pains. And a lot of us that are less experienced may be focused, yeah, but all I need is customers. Yeah, but I just need somebody to manage this. They think they kind of understand, but you've gotten over that and you're actually calling that stuff out and focus on it. Your conversation seems to focus around that. And so just an observation.
yeah. Because that was a huge pain point for me. Um, I didn't, I don't understand. I never understand how to delegate things properly. I never understood how to lead people. And so as my progression grew, because that's one thing that I can tell any business owner in any industry is if you don't grow yourself, you're not going to grow your company. You've got to and I learned that probably 4 or 5, 6 years into my business. And so really, I was really only doing what I should have been doing the whole time from years like 8 to 14.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
it's really only half the time did I actually become a business owner. And I wish I would have, had some of those realizations earlier because I know that, and I paid a lot of money for coaching myself because that was a I always say like I broke the seal. Like it's like drinking beer, and I don't drink, but I understand that when you
Yeah,
break the seal and you go use the restroom, like it's over for the rest of the night. Like
yeah,
you're gonna be pissing like every 10 minutes, right? So
I
when you
can
break
attest
the
to that.
seal on spending money to get your education,
Yeah,
um, I learned that relatively not very early. Like there's people out there today that are learning this far sooner. They're realizing the value of asking questions and looking for answers way faster than I was. There's a lot of smart people out there that are doing it way faster than what I did. So
sure, sure. So, real quick intro for Pete. I forgot to mention just real quick background because I don't want to spend too much time on this. We can move into more deeper things, but you kind of want to know who's talking to you.
yeah,
We're doing HVAC talk, and okay, you know what you're talking about, and clearly you do. You start in the trenches, you work your way up, you realize what's important to the point where that's what you're focused on today. And my journey was not too different, but it was different. And so I focus on other areas of the business. But they're both, I think, equally important. And so for me, I joined the Army straight out of high school, and they sent me to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and trained me as a heating and air conditioning engineer, is what they call us. And went through that, became a technician, did work my way through a couple of companies, got enough experience, and I started my business at the age of like 26 years old, I think I was thereabout. It's been a while. And I owned a business for about 10 years, and I sold that. So going from just me to, we had, we weren't that big. I was in a bad market too. I think I had 14 employees at my largest, and we really grew too fast during that time. So, you had to pull back and,
Sure.
wait and catch up for that. So went
Have
through that.
have a couple of bad hires mixed in there
Well,
that,
yeah, but
yeah.
what I realized too was, how you have a team, right? You got a pair of installers, and you got to keep, that's your profit center, or that's your, I used to call it queen bee. That's your queen bee, and she's making the big bucks, but you got to keep her busy. You got to keep her at capacity. So while your service techs, they're certainly profit centers as well. They become a really valuable lead generator. So in proportion to your install team, there's these techs, and then there's maintenance, and so once you've fully developed this team that's all at capacity and balance, now you start to add a second team on. And so this becomes a burden for that. And so that's that dip. And it's the around the $6 million mark, they say. Yeah.
In install efficiency, there's
Yes.
how many days in a year. I used to know this like right off the top of my head, on average for installs. And you can figure out, this is something that anyone listening could do, is figure out how many installs you've done and divide that by, take your number of available days in the year for install, and then divide that number by that, and that'll tell you your install efficiency, whatever. Which the goal is to come, always be upping that, obviously. I know there's 21 days in any given month, roughly. If you taking out holidays and weekends, and just figure out how many installs you do in a month, and then you
52 weeks in a year, take out 2 for holidays and weekends. Let's say 50 weeks a year times 5 days a week, 250 business days. We work weekends too sometimes, but 250 days might be a round number to start with. And then you look at how many installs, if it's 1 a day is your goal, to do a single day replacement and not have to come back the next day. Obviously, if there's ductwork involved, that'd be different, but something like that.
Yeah. So if it's whatever that number is, I want to say it's like 70 something. If it's like 76, let's say, but the number available, well, that's not the number. Let's say it's 80 something, but the number of days that you filled with the calendar, your schedule with installs is only 50. Well, then you've got to build that up before you're ready for another team, obviously. So it's just figuring out, where you're at before you're ready for that next addition.
It hurts. You go through it, and if you don't know how to measure these things, you're like, where's my money going? What's changed? I'm charging the same thing, right? That's why, I think today's software that, when I did it, we had the bookkeeping, it was DOS based. We didn't have really Windows based stuff. And when they did, it came out with QuickBooks, which was terrible back then. And so, there was a big learning curve for us. So my success came at maintaining capacity through the marketing side. And I know those of you guys who know me, my grandfather was a commercial artist. He free painted, freehand brush stroked all this stuff, and he was training me, and my dad was in the business, and those two fought like cats and dogs. But I learned a whole lot about that side, and I decided not to go in business with them, after leaving the Army. So I stayed in heating and air, and it kind of went from there. But my passion for that, the psychology, the mindset, a lot of stuff that I know, Kelley, you're into and you understand very well, is what shaped me. But what really helped me is I too went to some of those training courses, Kelly. Now there were different instructors back then because I'm old. I started in 1982. This is 2022. So I'm coming up on 40 years. And at age 46, that's pretty good, right? That's a
Yeah.
joke. So no, I was 18, so I'm 58 now. So, a lot of years passed. I've seen a lot of things, but I learned directly under Ron Smith.
Yeah.
He HVAC spells wealth and all this
Mhm.
stuff back when he was really active. And my gosh, what a change that did to our business. I remember we won awards and we were selling that even in that crappy market, we did so well. So
Yeah.
that people side of the business, right? The marketing side, the people side, and all those processes, that's what I really love. But I was not as good as you are on the management and understanding that part. We struggled with our numbers. I didn't get a lot of that straight, even after 10 years. I
Yeah.
did, I did take other classes, but my passion was on this other side, and sometimes we get out there.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so, but growth comes from pain and setbacks and mistakes and failings. You don't just go out there and become a millionaire, HVAC millionaire, pun intended.
Right. Yeah.
By taking some class, right? You gotta have the setbacks,
Yeah.
or somebody else's.
I I got lucky. I found there was a class that there was a old guy. I think he's still helping people. His name's Bill Ligon. He's got to be in his 90s. And he I went to a class. I was a ream dealer, and they offered a class, and it was like in Oklahoma. I know I had to drive to go to the class, and so I drove. Me and my wife went down there, and it was like a 2-day class, and for whatever reason, this guy really took me under his wing a little bit. Like he didn't like mentor me for months and months and months of no charge or anything like that. I had purchased some other products. Because I actually went to a different class of his because he was selling maintenance agreement, uh, basically like structure forms. And that came with a flat rate book. So it was maintenance agreements and flat rate pricing. But this was the old printable version. So it was like 352 pages or something.
Sure. Yeah,
Uh,
we had those. Yeah.
yeah. And it was made by, you're talking about, Ron Smith back in the day. Well, this was,
Wasn't Callahan Roach, was it?
no, it's Aptora, the same guy who makes Aptora. He calls himself Mr. HVAC. He had a YouTube channel. He's hardly done anything on there.
I think I
James
know what
liked
you're
her.
talking about.
James liked her.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I took a class and went ahead and purchased the flat rate system, but that just sat on my shelf.
Right.
I took it back to the office. It sat on the shelf. It didn't do anything because I didn't use it. And then was fortunate enough to go to this class, and that was what opened my eyes to this idea of overhead. And that my phone, like, now what I tell my clients, and I tell people that I talk to all the time, is that something that you have to understand is that the customer pays for everything.
Sure.
Every single thing that your business has, the customer's paying for.
Yep.
And that all has to be structured into your pricing. And when that's structured into your pricing, then all your overhead's taken care of. And that's what's going to fuel your growth. It's the number one thing that if people could just wrap their heads around it, to just, Ellen Rohr, she's an advocate for our industry, and she worked probably alongside Ron Smith on some different projects, I'm sure, through the years. And she owns Zoom Drain, which is a franchise, but she was involved in Clockworks, which was um, Jim Abrams and Terry
Yeah.
Nicholson, and Ellen. She was right in there with
Wow.
Clockworks with Mr. Sparky and uh, Benjamin Franklin Plumbing and 1 Hour. And so, but Ellen has been saying this for years: charge more, just charge more, like charge as much as you can, because and people still don't. Like
Well, they
I
see
can post a
the effort.
video about pricing something, even though I'm not trying to use actual numbers. It's just hypothetical, but people want to argue with me about the pricing, but or using the structure that I'm trying to teach. And it's the number one thing that can change any business is to just raise your prices. That's like the number one thing for any business that does any kind of business anywhere.
Yeah.
Will make the biggest impact. Now, you can't just continue to raise your prices, because eventually there will be a ceiling. People will start telling you no. But if people would just start raising their prices, they would dig themselves out of a hole a lot of times, and it would give them some breathing room to actually invest in their education from that point, right? And so I got lucky enough that somebody showed me that. I raised my prices. I started offering options, the
So,
simplest stuff. And then what do you know? We started to grow, and I was able to pay back like $60,000 worth of IRS debt and pull myself out of this hole that I dug. And that was when things changed.
so going from where you were charging and going to what you ultimately raised your prices to, what was really holding you back?
I mean, it's your mindset.
And that's what I was
At
looking
the end of
for.
the
A little
day,
bit of a
it's always the
setup there.
mindset.
I knew you'd know
So
the answer to that one. Yeah,
yeah,
it's the mindset. So you reminded me, I'm showing myself, and I'll say this really quickly. Back in the 90s, there were sitcoms, and one of the big ones was Cheers, and that was one of my favorite ones.
yeah,
And there was a restaurant, I think it was upstairs or downstairs, and the owner, that particular episode was he was going out of business, and they were like, "Wow, we love you. We eat there every day. The place is full." He says, he says, well, we just we can't make ends meet, and it became down to the price of a hamburger and whatever he was charging. Let's say it was 250 or something way back then. And he says, well, would you pay $3? And I go, yeah, of course. He said, well, would you pay 350? Well, yeah, of course. Well, would you pay $5? And I go, whoa, no, that's enough, right? But it was showing, it was just a sitcom, but it was showing what the market would bear. And in our business, I think we hold ourselves back exactly what you were saying because of our own limiting beliefs. And that
yeah,
usually comes from our, as a technician, we know what those parts cost wholesale, and we know what the boss charge. And so we got to be ripping people off, right? And that's kind of what's going on in the subconscious mind until it's taught to. And you mentioned some really good, awesome names. And for me, there was a lady, and she's still affiliated, an advocate of the business of the industry. Her name is Ruth King. Ruth
Ruth
King.
King,
And I
familiar
sat in
with
her
her.
class back around 1996 or 7, right around the time I'd added Linux as a line. Blew my mind. I mean,
Yeah,
and we broke that stuff down, what you were talking about. And it not only did I learn it and it opened up my mind, she taught it in such an easy way that when I had my company meeting and I taught my team, all of a sudden, all of that started working. Instead of them being ashamed of the price, it's $500, sign here. It's $500, good price. And
real quick,
yeah,
something to really understand is that when I started my business and when you started your business, YouTube wasn't even hardly a thing. Like nobody was on YouTube all day, every day. There was no, like, the internet was half of what it is today. Like we didn't even have, when I started, um, I don't even think I had a touch screen phone. You, I don't know what year it was exactly, but I could tell you in 1996 when went to work for my father-in-law, and he had one of those brick phones. And he was the only person I knew who carried a cell phone. So it wasn't a common thing. Um, so just having the resources, and what really brought this up for me is like Ruth King, for instance, because we were selling some Goodman there for the last year. We sold some Goodman equipment, and there's even some free trainings on their dealer portal that she's partnered with Goodman to help contractors out there. So there's all these extra resources out there as well that we didn't have
yeah.
when we were starting the business. It really wasn't there. So Facebook wasn't big back then. You couldn't go on and ask a group, hey, what do I do in this situation? Like that didn't exist.
So my business was during the nineties. When I started my business, all I had was a beeper and quarters, and
Yep.
you go to the payphones that were
Top of
around.
the payphone.
I got my bag phone, and then I remember people saying, "You've made it. You got your beeper, you got your bag phone,
Yeah.
you're a success now." I'm serious. I
We
remember guys
had,
telling me that. And but
so
yeah, and
yeah,
we added because we had a facsimile, or they call it a fax line dedicated for faxes. We added another telephone for dial-up internet. And when you go
yeah, dial up, yeah,
and make the connection, and America Online said, "You've got mail." We didn't have a website. I mean, so I went through all of that.
yeah.
But here's the crazy thing.
You understand how to read a real map,
Yeah,
like I
real
do.
map. Yeah, we use
That's the only
Mapsco.
way you could find
And
any houses. You had to
you
read a map.
Yeah, you actually had to read a map.
Yeah,
We use Mapsco. I know in Dallas when I was a tech, we used Mapsco. That was a really good book. But they didn't have, they had another version in the Carolinas when I had my business. But yeah, you had to read a map. You had to, it's a lot of stuff you had to do. You really had to be able to work well without much. We used the 800 megahertz handheld radios, and they could get anywhere in town. So we could get help, but everybody's radio was, open to the same frequency. And so there wasn't a lot of
yeah,
privacy on there. So it's not like a
yeah.
cell phone.
I would say in 1996, 97, about 1998, I went to work for a different company and they had radios. So I'm familiar with radios.
Right.
When you needed help, you just hope that the senior tech was in his truck,
Sure.
and I'd be like, I need help. So
Yeah. Wow.
yeah,
Memories. But
yeah,
we talked a lot about us and what got us to this point. I think ultimately we definitely want to bounce back and forth from those times to these times
yeah,
for all these guys that are out there, and they're, no matter where they are in their, stage of progression, whether, junior tech or just coming to the industry, or they just started their business, or, maybe they're established and they're just looking for a little bit of, like you said, it's lonely at the top. You just having somebody, everybody says, boss, what I do, what I do. Who do you call? Who do you get a little bit of feedback from? And one of the things, aren't you a member? Don't you have like some groups that you work with as well? With
yeah.
business
We do like HVAC millionaire coaching, HMC, I call it, or
on the
me and a
coaching?
business partner. So
Okay, okay, cool.
yeah, I'm a
Do you do
co-founder,
any? We do a couple of mastermind groups as well, and
Mhm.
um, that's kind of cool too, because I'm not taking the lead; they are. And so it's
Yeah.
really cool. I've got my finger on the pulse a lot of times of all the problems that are going on. And yet, and you know what's crazy, Kelley, is it's my lessons from back in the 90s a lot of times
Still
that you
relevant
have to
today.
reintroduce today, right? And package it right.
Yeah.
It works, you know?
It's like success principles, like they're universal. They're never going to go away. They work.
We
And
had one, it was a mastermind call just, I think it was just last month. And they were talking about, how do you prioritize calls? And there's programs for that, obviously, but it sent me back to a book that was written in the 80s, and it was called The 1 Minute Manager. You remember that one?
yeah, I actually got it again and listened to it just a couple of months ago. I don't have the physical copy, but I've listened to it on Audible like twice.
So yeah, I had the physical copy, and it had a quadrant. It was talking about how to prioritize things
Mhm.
on what was urgent and what was important, and the difference between the two, and how to, just little things like that. And we introduced that. This is books that were written way back, and everybody's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that's so cool. We hadn't heard of that one before. Where did that come from?" And that's what I'm saying. A lot of this stuff, we just look backwards and think, well, they're old. They don't know. But aren't the best I mean, you do a lot of personal development. Aren't some of the best self-help books or development books written way back in the day?
Oh,
And you think about
absolutely.
it today?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not that some of today's books aren't really relevant and really good.
that's
Like
true.
for instance, just a couple I just read. He wrote a book called Essentialism, Greg McCowan, and I didn't read that one, but his new book is Effortless. It's really good.
Mm,
And I'm trying to think of the other one that's really good that I've got.
one thing.
The One Thing by oh, who is that by? on my bookshelf over there. I can't read it. I can't remember his name. It's been a while since I've read that one. I need to read it again. But still, the oldies but goodies, Think and Grow Rich. That's one that I come back to over and over again. That's my
Sure.
favorite, one of my favorite books ever.
Yeah.
How to Win Friends and Influence People. One of my favorites is The Success Principles, how to get from where you are to where you want to be. Love that book. I come back to it every year or two, read it again.
One of the things I've noticed a lot of business owners that's really trendy and
And
what,
real quick, Pete,
yeah,
Think and Grow Rich was probably maybe my second or third book I'd ever read in my life at 34 or 35 years old.
wow.
So I did not read at all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
once I got myself into pain, and then I found a category that I really was passionate over. And then when I implemented some things, my life started to work better. And so from there, it was just a case of, it's not that I didn't like to read, it's that I never found the right books to read. But
We
since
feel,
then, I've got books all over my house. Like I read all the time. So.
yeah, it requires your ability to focus. And a lot of times, when you're out there and you can't get through dinner without thinking about, oh my gosh, the job on Tuesday, what am I going to do? Or I should not have told that lady, that we'd take that job, whatever, all this different stuff. And a lot of times it's hard to stay focused, and being able to train yourself to take that time away, focus on something else, and it being good for you at the same time. That's huge. For me, I mean, I started reading early, not too early, because true story, I'm in the Army. We're bored. Now we're all like 19 years old. A bunch of, I think we just got deployed to go to Central America. And I had picked up a pocket dictionary. And I was sitting there flipping through it. And one of the, we have nothing to do. It's the thing you do in the Army a lot of times, just waiting. And I'm looking up words that I don't know, just because in the military they used big words that it wasn't part of my vocabulary.
Yeah.
They didn't go to the grocery store. They went to the commissary. They didn't go to the store. They went to the post exchange. I'm like, what does that mean? And so you start looking.
Hey,
Oh, okay.
real quick, let me point this out. That's like building a culture, kind of. So, because if you're on the military base, you call it a commissary, where all the civilian folk just call it a grocery store. It's
Yes.
language. And
Yes.
people need to use this with their teams too. You don't
Yes.
call it just a service contract or a maintenance agreement. You make up your own name that everybody on your team can associate with, that's different than everybody else. So I just wanted to point that out real quick.
And if you reverse engineered it, it builds value in your customers' ears. Wow, they don't just do a managed agreement, they do the super savings system program or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
So
Customers
but
managers,
what I had gotten out of this
certificate
was a little different. That's what inspired, words I didn't know. But one of my buddies comes up to me and says, "Hey Pete, what you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm looking up words I don't know." He goes, "Ask me one." And so what I would do is I'd look up a word I knew I didn't know, and I'd ask him, and he didn't know it either. And then here comes another guy, and here comes another guy. Before you know it, we got about 5 of us around. And one of the guys' his name is Ty Bassham. We're friends to this day. He's in Oklahoma. That's why I was laughing. We're friends all these years later. I would look up a word I didn't know, or I would look up a word I didn't know. He goes, "Oh yeah, that's like," and he would use it in the sentence. He couldn't define it. The definition is blah blah blah. He says, "Oh, like when you're going down the street and you did this, and nobody could get one past him." And I said, "Dude, I mean, just it overcame me. How do you know this?" He said, "Well, I read a lot."
Yeah.
That
My
was all.
wife is like a borderline genius. She reads fiction, but she reads like nonstop. I mean, she probably reads, who knows? I can't even tell you. I'll bet she reads 5-6 books a week.
Sure.
Not joking. Like, she reads anytime she's sitting, she's got a book in her hand. Like, she uses a Kindle. So, but she's like that. Like, you can, any word that I don't know, I can just ask her and she'll tell me what it means.
And I think we ought to clarify this to anybody listening. This is no substitute for real life experience.
Yeah,
You have
no,
got to have both. Am I right?
100%.
Yeah, I remember my dad. He was my inspiration for reading, because that when my mind was blown, that story I just told, I remember my dad, who knew everything. He was just constantly reading. But he had
Yeah,
gotten into this research. He was self-taught, and he was doing all this work. And he would get emails from these people with doctorates and PhDs and just get titles with all these acronyms, asking for his help. And these guys have done all the studies, they've read all the books, but this guy had the real life experience, and that's where the value comes from too. And so, yeah, we need to understand all these concepts and everything else that we read. We need to, exercise our minds and grow. But those of you guys out there who you're under the houses and you're in the annex and you're making all the mistakes and you're getting better and better. There is no substitute for that. I think it was
no,
Pat Riley. He wrote a book. He said, "Do not underestimate the time you spent in the trenches, because they will pay huge dividends later." So all those years as a helper and as a junior and junior installer or junior tech and tech, um, breaking into sales and building your way up through that, all those no's to get to the point. So all of that matters, but it's a lot easier, isn't it, Kelley, to learn from somebody else's mistakes? You get a point where you're like, let me just read
oh,
and learn from them.
completely. Like there's so many, I've also heard that you're going to pay for your education in mistakes, or you're going to go out and buy it somewhere. Like
That's true.
no matter what, there is no shortcut past paying for your education. You're going to pay for it one way or another. That's the truth, and it will always be the truth. And but you can avoid a lot of really stupid mistakes just because you're not thinking properly. You're not thinking like a business owner. You're not evaluating. One of the things that I teach is real quick. Napoleon Hill, one of my favorite quotes: every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage, or every adversity, every failure, every heartbreak carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit.
Yeah.
You know,
So every screw up, you get something out of it.
you always get something out of it. And yeah, but it's
But if you allow yourself, you can learn from somebody else's screw up by reading these books. And you just gave a wonderful example about all somebody had to do is bring to your attention about adding that overhead, because that's got to be built into the price. And I know you said it better than I did, but I can relate it to from the time I was a technician. I'm a helper, and I've got my Black and Decker drill guns back
yeah,
back when that was the cheapest thing you
the
could
wall
get.
didn't exist. Yeah.
Well, I had some pretty good forearms, because all I had was nut drivers, little quarter inch,
Yeah.
5/16,
Yeah.
3/8, that you always kept in. But so I'd up to that, and so I'm putting this unit together. He goes, "Hey, be careful, you don't grab the wrong screw. You're getting close to the coils there." And a lot of people will run a screw in and pierce the coils, and then now you really have a problem. I
Right.
never forgot that. And I've been in this industry for 40 years, and I've been on this side for, a long, in all of my technical years, I never, ever, ever drilled a screw into a coil. But I remember
I
the day my
did.
helper, I remember the day my helper did. What I'm saying is I learned from somebody else's
Yeah.
experience. That's what books
Yeah.
are.
See, nobody ever told me that. So I didn't learn that until I experienced it myself as a
Yes,
technician. And
yes,
thankfully, the guy, I was working for a company at the time, and they came in, and it was an antique old piece of junk, like one of those radiator coils. So repairing it was almost
yeah,
impossible, almost.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
special solder, all this stuff. And thankfully, I went and I took off to go get the solder that I needed, the right special solder. And then um, their sales guy came in, wound up selling them a new system because it was like a 35-year-old system. So thankfully, I escaped that, but
Yeah.
I've made that mistake. So I'm telling you, there's not hardly a mistake that I have not made.
Oh yeah,
Um,
me too.
when
Me
you
too.
do, and here's the thing too, is like I seen this a lot in my business as an owner when you hire people. So I would hire people and they'd tell me, "Oh, I got 5-year experience. I've been installing for 5 years." or I've been in the field for 15 years or whatever. And you turn them loose, and I didn't see those 15 years. I don't know what that experience actually looked like, but I can't be the only one who experienced this. I'm sure there's other people listening who have experienced this as well, but not all experiences created equal. So some people, their 5 years might have consisted of, even in today's standards, like some of the most successful companies that are only running 3 to 4 calls a day. Well, I'm from the old school where we ran 8 calls a day or 9, and we worked till 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
So that's a lot of damn experience, a lot. And that was my whole career. I mean, I did that for 22, 23 years. I did that. I ran a lot of calls. I've got a ton of experience, and every so often I'd hire somebody, they'd come in, tell me they got all this experience, and they didn't know diddly squat. They couldn't get the condenser fan motor off a shaft if their life depended on it.
yeah.
They had no like it. Oh, it's not coming off. I'm gonna have to run to the supply house, get a new one. And I've seen guys sitting in the supply house, just last summer. They come in with their fan motor, they can't get the blade off. Like, dude, give me 10 minutes with that thing. I'll get it off one way or
Sure.
another.
Yeah.
Because it's not even scuffed up, and it's not
Yeah.
even, it's not even rusty or anything. So
A lot
anyhow,
of people, they give up too quickly. It's like anything else. Once you beat like electric was a really good example. I'll never forget. It was a Linux rooftop. It was bigger than a freaking bus. I mean, it was huge, and it wouldn't come online. They had all these white wires. This is back in everything was white, and it wouldn't come online. And I'm tracing. My boss called me, says, "You need to get off that job." I said, "I think I got it," but I'm trying to figure this thing out. And it goes all the way back to a thermistor that was embedded in the suction line that took it offline. It was some type of reset. I can't remember now, but basically the superheat was too high, meaning the charge was too low, took the compressor offline, and that's all it was, undercharged a little bit. So, but
yeah.
it's, but the lessons that came with all of that effort and time and
Oh
everything
yeah.
else shortcut future service calls, because I've been through that. You've been through that. You
Yeah.
guys listening are going through that. You know, never underestimate your time in the trenches.
Yeah, I'm not even talking
Struggling.
about technical issues. I'm talking about mechanical issues.
It's
Like,
a universal, yeah, that's a universal truth. I mean, it's business too.
yeah,
Life keeps teaching you the same lesson until you learn the lesson and you adjust.
yeah. So that's what I was going to say earlier is I teach just this. It's a success principle. Feedback, everything is feedback. You are constantly receiving feedback from your
Well,
body telling you, hey, this is not right. You need to stop this. Hey, this is your, or from your boss or from your business. It's all feedback. And so, but people want to pretend that they're not listening to it. They want to la 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 and act like it doesn't exist or something. When things aren't right. And I get it because I've been there. I am guilty
yeah,
because a lot of times I would have some feedback and I would know, hey, I need to make this decision. I need to do this thing, but it required like a really difficult conversation or something. And, I would put it off and then things would get better. And then it would be like, okay, it wasn't that bad. Right. And that's just, you can't do that. Like you have to, because that creates a loss of trust with your team, because when you enforce a policy or a rule or standards or values, and those things get broken, if you don't ensure that you're going to fix them anytime that does happen, then everyone else says, well, you know he didn't do anything when Bobby over there broke the rules.
Ooh,
So it's like so I've talked about this on a video before. It's like broken window theory, which is a concept that I'd never heard of, but I read this book called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about how this New York City subway system was losing millions of dollars a year. There's graffiti all over the cars, the train cars. There's graffiti all over the walls. People were jumping the turnstile, so they weren't paying for
yeah,
for their
the
commute,
ride.
their
Yeah,
ride. And if somebody jumped one of the turnstiles, then the next people would jump them too, because they saw that, hey, that guy just jumped him, he didn't get in trouble. And so that's broken window theory. If you have a broken window in a building and it doesn't get repaired, thieves eventually think that it's okay to just go ahead and let themselves in. But they found if you fix that window, if you fix it, like,
Yeah.
not, chop the head off the snake right when it begins,
Okay.
then people will stay out of it. And it's just, so anyhow, they've completely revamped, just by making subtle changes. And this is the way business is too, is you can make little subtle changes that can drastically improve what your, is business is capable of. It doesn't have to take, when they first started arresting people for jumping turnstiles, it would take them all day to book them. And so police officers didn't want to mess with that. It just created a traffic jam. And so they figured out a system. Hey, here's how we can give people a ticket and not take them downtown, just give them a ticket. And it only takes 10 minutes. Soon as they did that and they streamlined that process, well, then they were able to stop people from not paying, because it wasn't worth getting a ticket over. and so when it came to the graffiti automatically invited more crime into the subway. And so they painted all the walls and painted all the cars. And anytime one of the subway cars got some more graffiti on it, they would pull it off of the track and they'd put it in a lot, and it would sit there until it got repainted. And then they would, back to its normal condition. Then they would put it back on. That way there was never any graffiti. And these little tiny subtle changes went from losing millions of dollars to earning millions of dollars for the New York City subway system. While the cars were sitting in the lots, they would allow these graffiti artists to go in there. They would sneak in at night, and they would spend one whole night getting a blank canvas. They'd paint it white. Then they'd come back the next night and get started on their art. And they would wait for them to finish. And once they finished, then they would go in and repaint the car again. And it deflated the graffiti arts, because they just saw they spent all this time for nothing. It never even made it to the public. And so they stopped, and everything got better. So there's a lot of bad cultures out there, I'm sure, in a lot of businesses, not just HVAC, but HVAC as well.
Yeah, you're really into the leadership role or area in discussing this, because human nature creates these situations, and we can look at what we consider, well, I never do that level people, but there's at every level in every category. Your customers do this stuff to you. They figure out a way to beat your system. Your employees do it. Heck, if you're truthful with yourself, you do it. You try to cheat yourself out of self-delusion, and with I'll work out tomorrow, or there's all this different stuff that we do, but it's just human nature. And the quicker we come to realize that, come to grips with it, and I think it starts with us, right?
Yeah,
get your own house in order.
Just like you said, an illusion, you've got to be careful with that. That's something I realized. I've had a lot of time to reflect since the business sold, and I can see like so many things that I did wrong. And so one of those things is just having this fantasy that everybody's gonna, be an A player. Not that I didn't have some A players, and I had some B players that were working towards A players, had all of that. But it's a fantasy to expect everybody to be A players. It's just a fantasy. You're gonna have some B players. Of course, if you got C players, get them off your team if you can't find a different position for them on the bus, or if you can't. But trying to fix people, I spent many years trying to fix people, and they would get better for a week or a month or 2 months, and then they go right back to their old behavior. And so that was, if you get what I'm saying around fantasy, there's always, like, put it this way, you have somebody who somebody who always goes the extra mile, always works hard, whatever. Well, if you start sending that person home early, what you'll find is there's going to be a natural balance. Like somebody who is maybe doesn't work quite as hard should step up to help fill that role. It's kind of like when you do get rid of some people who aren't as productive as other people on your team, then the rest of the team will pick up the pace to fill the gap that is left by the person who left. That countless owners have experienced that. And there's like a balance happening at all times. This is something that I'm just learning more about. Like,
referring back to that same book, The 1 Minute Manager, it talked about two basic categories. There was skill set, how much experience and ability does this person have? So that requires training to bring them up. And there was motivation. And so, what does that take? And so some people you have to manage and be on top of them. Step one, now go to this, now go to that. The other ones you need to coach, right? And still others, you need to motivate them and get out of their way. But they all need structure. And so one of the biggest, if you're out there listening and you're a one-man show in your business for yourself, this is one of those things that I'm sure Kelley and I've never talked about this, but I'm sure you can attest to it. Your thought is, all I need is to get another technician who can work at my level and can step in, and this will free me up to work on my business, not so much in my business, but on my business and everything else. And that's a great strategy. But the interesting thing is, number one, it doesn't quite happen that way generally. I mean, we can get pretty lucky and get a person with the right attitude and everything else. But no, they're not going to do. I never was able to find a technician that did things the way I wanted them done. I just couldn't find them. And in my mind, they weren't as good as me. Maybe I was wrong, but that was the way I saw things. But there were things that I did. There was a reason that I did it, and the ultimate, the end result was that I had customers that would say, "Hey, Pete, this guy's a nice guy, but we'd really like to have you back." And there was something that I had established the customer liked. That's why they stayed with me. But because I couldn't take all this stuff that was in my head, I just automatically knew and did, and just look at something that I knew and pass that into their heads. I just assumed that they had, since they had experience, they had the same experience, but they don't. They haven't run into the same headaches. They haven't overcome the same challenges. They've overcome their own. There's probably some things that they could teach me on. So if you're adding that second person, odds are you're not going to get them quite to that level. So you're going to have to settle a little bit and do some training, right? Hopefully you'll find the right, shared values and right proper characteristics for that particular role that are just necessary, right? Good work ethic, attention to detail, love technical stuff, whatever. But if you can give them, if you've taken the time, at least taking that structure and put it out and train them on that, they've got something to go by, and you can provide a little consistency to your customer experience as well as to the equipment. Let's say procedures, whether it's diagnostics or maybe installation or anything. So putting processes together, basically, right? Putting processes together that you've been through and everything else. But there is some stuff out there.
Simplicity on the process too. If you make the process too complicated, it will not be followed.
Love that.
I don't care how much training you do on it. It just will not happen. They're going to develop their own nuances and stuff that go along with it. So it's like, if you can just get 80% of it right, you're doing really well, and usually 80% of a process is going to get the job done, in a proficient manner.
So the guy I work for, if you called him and you didn't have these measurements written down, he's sending you right back. And so, what was your suction pressure? What was your head pressure, for example? It was good. He said, "Show me good on the gauge." Good does not exist on the set of gauges. They don't exist on a multimeter. What is the number? Okay, what is
Yeah.
the speed? What is the drop across the coil? What is the static pressure?
All my guys know that they need to have these numbers too when they call me.
Right,
When they
right.
did call me, they need to know. I'm going to ask, what's your
I
suction pressure?
hated that. I hated that. I hated that, Kelly. And I remember, I was a junior tech, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna show the old fart something. I'm gonna get all these numbers and I'm gonna throw it in his face and say, now tell me what's wrong. Smart aleck, right? Problem was when I did all these tests, I found the problem. It pointed
Yeah.
me to the problem,
Yeah.
right? So I didn't know what he was teaching me, at the time, but anyway, providing that structure throughout your organization, and what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You have to have your structure. Your technicians have to have theirs. The office staff has to have theirs. You hire a person, go run my office for me. She's an office manager. She worked for multiple companies, and I made her my office manager. And now I'm just going to go and see
Abdication. They call that abdication.
advocation.
You abdicate. That's not delegating. You abdicate. Abdicate. You literally just say, here you go. Your problem now. I got to go do this. It doesn't work. I've
Yeah.
learned it doesn't work. They have what gets measured gets what gets managed. What gets measured gets managed. So you still have to measure it. Even if you delegate it and you delegate it properly, it still has to be managed, checked in on every so often, to ensure that it's continuing to happen. I learned this just a couple of weeks ago, and he said there's four types of, it was Brian Tracy training. He's like, there's four types of workers, or whatever you want to call them, employees or just people, right? They're skilled plus engaged. It's kind of just what you were talking about. But then there's not skilled but engaged. And then there's skilled and not engaged. And then there's not skilled and not engaged.
Right. That's the four quadrants that was in that book. So exactly.
Oh, is it in a book?
Yeah.
I don't
it was worded a little differently, but that's exactly it. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you have to be able to navigate that. But you said what gets measured is what gets managed. And I remember even beyond that, this is one of my mentors said, I can't remember who it was now, was what gets measured is what gets done. So if you do have employees and you're posting results and you know what you want to work, you know what you want to accomplish, if you measure those and post those, it tends to get done. So just one more addition to what you said a minute ago. So,
another thing that we talk about and teach is when you get employees, like you have to know, of course they should know what your mission, vision, values are, of course, because you share that as a company and you hope that they match those, of course, when you hire them, so they can fit in. And but one of the things is that you I lost my train of thought.
where you lead towards culture
yeah, where I was going with that is I'm trying to think.
That's okay.
It happens sometimes,
So I'll deviate from that just one second. So guys, I hope that you kind of like what we're doing here, but what we would like to do is we need a third person in here at least. Now, I know we've got Gil over there at Uncensored. I think he's going to pop in occasionally as well, but he's pretty busy. But we've got one candidate we're going to talk to and see if we can add him. But beneath these videos, I think I'm going to post these over on my YouTube channel, HVAC Greatness, and I know Kelley was wanting to post them over in his. We'll have a little name and episode number, kind of like a podcast, I guess. But what we would like to do is maybe if you'll, in your comment section, bring up some topics that you'd like to discuss, because a lot of times when you're so far down the road, like old man Kelley here, or even farther down the road, like Grandpa Pete, we assume that and we kind of skim over things too fast, and maybe we don't break it down, and you're like, whoa, back up. How does that work, right? And you do the same thing in areas that you've been through. So could we appeal to you to please ask questions in the comments, and I'll make notes, he'll make notes, and we'll definitely do our best to incorporate these, but we would like to keep this, and I don't want to put words in Kelly's mouth, but in line with what you want to know, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We want it to be of value and of service. So if it's certain topics, and I apologize for like losing my train of thought and I know earlier when I
You
was
get my
talking
age,
about,
you know.
well, I've been on the computer since 10:30 today, and it's almost 9:30.
It's late here. Yeah.
That's been a long day sitting in this chair. But earlier when I was talking about, I'll find out the exact math because I can't remember it off the top of my head. But when I was talking about install efficiency, I'll definitely share things like that, because that's stuff that once you know that number, you can start measuring it. And we just want to provide value. That's the bottom line. But we've been in
Yep.
the trenches, been in
Yep.
the
Yep.
trenches.
Yeah, because I mean, the last thing that you need is some condescending attitude, like all you have to do is this. The guys, I'm gonna tell you, if I tell you some of the stuff I screwed up, you'd laugh at me. I mean, I've made about every mistake in the book more than once, right? Except for running a screw in the condenser coil. I never did that. But no offense to
I only
Kelly,
did it once. So
but only once, right? But all we're saying is, it sometimes, it takes one of your own to really, that you can open up to, and you can talk about these things and communicate. Because, I can ask Kelly, I know there's questions that I can ask him that I could never ask the rest of the world outside of our industry, for example, or outside of this area of expertise. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. And that's just, again, it's just experience. If you've been a technician for many years, you know, you know, uh, what, I don't know, brazing a coil in an aluminum coil leak might entail, right?
mhm.
Pulling your hair out, right? Versus copper, right? Somebody who's never run into that, maybe that's not the best example, but the point is, you're
Yeah,
talking to
yeah, yeah.
people who are from your world, been around a little bit longer, and you know what? We don't know everything, but
I definitely don't know everything. I'm not one of these super technical guys. I never have been.
yeah,
I'm about, let's get the job done, let's get it done right.
right.
Very anal about doing it as right as I can. So much so that, like, I'm not good on installs, because it's going to take 12 hours for me to do an install because I want it to be perfect. Um, you know, I found a happy medium for the short time that I had to install, but um, there has to be a balance. That I see guys too in our industry that won't grow because people won't do it exactly like they want it done, which is what you were talking about earlier. Well, it doesn't have to be done like you did it. They're going to do it their way,
I
and
lost
it might wind up better than yours. And that's an ego hit that people don't like. It's a tough thing.
it is.
But
I was going to say I lost a lot of money because I refused to drop certain tasks out of my installations that my
yeah,
competition would, because I just didn't want my name on that. And
yeah,
I I did not understand my numbers as well as I thought I did. In fact, we were talking about that. I think we're going to be talking to a numbers guy because, listen, I know a lot. I've got a lot of experience, but I guarantee if I don't know it, Kelley probably does. And if we get the right person joining us, some out of the three, we should
yeah,
have something. We should be able to
yeah,
address just most of the stuff in our industry.
yeah.
So,
I'm not a
um,
numbers expert, obviously. I'm not a numbers expert, but what I do know is industry standards, and you can measure your own performance off of industry standards to know where you're at, and that's going to give you a good idea as long as your financials are structured properly. um, but I'm not the guru at that. That's where, if we can get another partner in here, he's a guru at that, and he can help with that,
but
making sure that your books are structured properly.
I love hearing your strengths and weaknesses because I have mine, but mine actually was what I did is I went through the numbers and I just started figuring this stuff out myself. And when I was doing the pricing methods that they were teaching us, I started to see that they wouldn't work if equipment prices started, costs started exceeding a certain percentage of the job, as well as labor. And I started making this connection, and I unknowingly discovered what they talk about now is GP per crew hour or crew day or man hour or man day. And I can
Gross profit
remember,
per man. Yeah.
yeah, I remember sitting in a class, I didn't know the right words, and the instructor was like, you don't know what you're talking about. I knew exactly what I was talking about. I just didn't know, I couldn't, we weren't speaking the same language. I'd figured it out, but these
Right.
guys, they had the proper terminology and everything else.
Yeah.
So it's common, not common sense, but it's what we would call common sense, being able to logically just understand, okay, if you take away
Yeah.
from here, it's got to come from somewhere. It's got to go somewhere. And so you don't, guys, you don't have to know
You
every
don't
art.
have to be a numbers guru to run an efficient, profitable business.
Sure don't. Because I
Really
want to tell you
straight.
one thing, as opposed to getting your exact price perfect for your overhead and your sales, compared to raising your prices like Kelley mentioned on the prior thing, or making some type of another adjustment like filling your books a little bit better, staying at more capacity. If you just look at capacity versus knowing your exact numbers, you can know your exact numbers and say, oh, I got to raise my price, and all of a sudden your numbers drop because people were buying from you because you weren't selling, you were pricing, and I've seen that. So there's a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
So we'll
And
walk through all that.
I don't want that to be what I said to be taken out of context. I'm not saying you don't need to know your numbers. You do.
Yes,
Um, I'm just saying you don't have to be like a whiz guru at it. Once you learn just what you're looking for and how to measure it, you still got to measure it, you still got to
I love
know.
that.
But
That's brilliantly said. That's exactly what I do with new students. Is they're like, well, I need my numbers and everything else. Let's get your overhead in here, but let's just start with the KPIs. What is the industry doing? What is what is their overhead? A percentage of total revenues, and what
yeah,
is their markup on service? What is their markup on equipment replacement? What is their, what are these GP numbers? Why not let's get you in line with the industry, and all of a sudden what you'll find out is you got a lot of wiggle room because you don't have near the overhead, right? And so you can actually pull back a little bit if you need to, but I don't start with digging into that either, because to your point, Kelley, um, it's important. It's vitally important as you get bigger in all these different departments and stuff like that. But for right now, if you're 1, 2, 3 man operation, there's other things you probably need to be focused on.
oh,
You want
100%. You need to be focused on sales, period.
yeah.
Period. I mean, I hate to, nobody wants to hear this. Nobody wants to hear how you have to go sell now that you own a business. Like I said earlier, like, what do you think your business survives off of? Who are you? What are you pretending not to know? What are you pretending not to know? Because it's pretty common sense and I get it because I was there. I didn't think this way. I thought I'm best friends with all my customers. I'm gonna take care of them. I was good, fast, and cheap, and you just can't be. You just can't
No.
be. We can be friends with everybody, but we're also going to charge those friends when we
Yeah,
do a job well done, and that's how it has to be. There has to be a fair exchange. I've talked extensively about fair exchange. If you
yeah,
don't have a fair exchange, you will begin to resent the business. You will begin to hate what you do for a living.
sure. And that may require what's called a paradigm shift, or a
Yeah.
little reality check. And those are fun to have, by the way, because once you're on the other side, you're like, oh, it's liberating. I get it now,
Yeah.
and
Depending on
so
how deep the hole it is that you're
that's true. That's true. So, Kelly, we're going to try to keep these between 30 minutes and an hour, and we're approaching, I don't know, about 45 minutes or so. What would you say to kind of wrap this one down? And let's start figuring out where we're gonna have the other ones, and maybe start considering where we're gonna go with this thing. Because I think this is a vacuum that needs to be filled. And so, we're just a couple of guys that have been there, but we'll shoot straight. What would you say beyond that?
I'm not ever gonna say anything's gonna be easy in growing an HVAC business. I'm not ever gonna pretend that it's not difficult and hard, and you're gonna have to grow as a person and change who you currently operate as to somebody different. That has to happen. You have to transform from a technician to a business owner. I've talked about this on my YouTube channel. Like you can't stay a technician and run a great business. I just don't believe that's possible unless you have a lot of, if you got an angel investor throwing millions of dollars at you to hire all the people to run the business for you, then you can continue to do a technician's role, but that never happens. So,
and I would offer to soften that a little bit, because depending on where you are, that may be intimidating. But having been through this, guys, you're going to change who you are anyway. It's just part of growing.
Yeah.
Whether you do it proactively or life just happens and it happens to you, but don't consider it like, that's not who I am and I could never say. Just take who you are and let's add some talents and some insights and grow that. And before you know it, people will think you changed. It's still you, but you've got all this additional.
It's just the new, improved, more skilled you. So as far as adding that to it, I didn't do a very good job there of adding to it. I think it's just a case of Pete and I we're sewn from the same cloth, and we share similar values. We know what it's like. I've spent hundreds of hours in a crawl space, hundreds of hours in an attic, hundreds of overtime hours, thousands of overtime hours. We just know what it's like. We know what it's like to grow from nothing, from just barely starting out to growing and actually operating. And I think we had 17, 18, possibly even 19 employees at one time. But it was the same thing, hired some, the numbers got out of whack, so we had to fix that. But there's so many things that we both would do differently, and so we like to share some of that on here because I think it'll be valuable to some of you guys that are trying to grow your business. You can maybe skip some of those things and you're still going to have to, I still invite you to, look into both of our programs, what we have to offer, because any more of the education that you can get is going to be extremely beneficial to your growth and progression in your business. So
sure. And we'll talk about that more in depth as we go. This is not all about selling us and everything else, about helping you. But by the same token, I mean, you got to eat too, right? You got to get charged for your services. So, everybody goes through that. But I had a thought and I lost it now. Kelley, something that you said, and I'm going to hand it back to you what the heck was it? You said something. So I'll catch it on the next one then. Don't you hate that?
I hate that. Yeah. Happened to me this time too. So it happens.
So if we do this right, maybe you guys can pop it instead of, you can drive and not have to look at our ugly faces and just maybe hear us talking and be a nice supplement to your podcasting. We'll put some playlists together on YouTube, and who knows, maybe it'll be a podcast one day, but for now it's a resource. Take advantage, fill in your drive time, whatever way it works for you. And we will see you. This was the introductory, a little bit about us and everything else. And just know that, we're here to help you. Ask questions in the comments. And I guess we'll see you guys on the next one. Sound good?
Go make money.
Go make money. All right, guys. See you later.
Yeah.